27th September 2016, a black man, a Ugandan refugee, gunned down by police in the city of El Cajon in Southern California.
The police did it again, y'all. They shot another unarmed black person.
At 3:45 p.m., Alfred Olango was pronounced dead. Protesters swarmed the streets of El Cajon, condemning yet another in a string of police shootings that divided the United States.
Black lives matter! All lives matter! All lives matter! Alfred Olango! Alfred Olango!
Black, white, brown, all demanding justice in Alfred Olango's death. But 3 months later, the local prosecutor clears the officer. The lethal shots were reasonable, she said, fired in self-defense. To his devastated family, Ugandan refugees who came to the United States more than 20 years ago, Alfred Olango's death was an incalculable loss.
We have come from a war zone. We wanted protection. That's why we're here.
How did a 38-year-old Ugandan become a casualty in America's conflict over race and police violence? Was the shooting necessary? Or, as his family says in court, an abuse of Alfred Olango's civil rights? I traveled nearly 10,000 miles from Kampala to investigate the death of Alfred Olango. With my reporting partner Paul Ndiho from the Voice of America, we discovered new evidence about how the police handled Olango's case, and a fateful decision, one that may have made the difference between life and death. San Diego, a jewel on the Pacific coast of Southern California, a major urban area of 1.4 million people. It is a tranquil city, known for its laid-back vibe and diversity. But it has not escaped the rush of fatal police shootings across the United States. At least 963 people were shot and killed by law enforcement in 2016. That is an average of more than 2 a day, according to the Washington Post. The count includes 138 in the state of California and 8 in San Diego County. None caused more outrage than Alfred Olango's.
We are here today to address the killing of another unarmed black man in this country, Alfred Olango.
The city of El Cajon in suburban San Diego has been a welcoming place for African immigrants. Like many places in the United States, it is a community struggling with crime, gangs, and illegal drugs. Videos of Alfred Olango's violent last moments flashed across the news and the social media. Olango seen walking strangely, officers approaching, one with a gun, another with a taser, then a sudden move. And from the available video footage, this particular location was where Olango was standing, right there, where you see Paul there. Fatal police shootings of blacks are a running controversy in the United States, sparking nationwide protests and debate. But police have been targets too. 63 died from gunfire in 2016. In the month before the Olango shooting, 5 police officers were killed in the city of Dallas, Texas, when a black gunman targeted them during a protest over police shootings.
Justice! Y'all don't get no peace! If we don't get no justice, y'all don't get no peace!
Americans are polarized, some backing police, others condemning them. But the issue is not so clear-cut. One big reason is that a quarter of those shot by police have a psychiatric illness or mental distress. Michael Biasotti is a retired police chief. He currently works as a consultant on issues of law enforcement and mental illness.
Every police officer deals with this issue almost on a daily basis. It's a very large percentage of police calls. Things like crisis intervention training or de-escalation training should be a part of a basic police academy when you come into law enforcement, so that you it becomes a part of the profession. It changes the culture of the profession.
Alfred Olango did not have a mental illness, his family members say. But days before he died, an event happened that threw him into emotional crisis. And it caused Alfred to act in ways that put him and others in mortal danger. Lukutu village, northern Uganda, birthplace of Alfred Olango in 1978. Alfred was a middle child among 9 in the family. On Facebook, his father, Richard Olango Abuka, said he served with the Ugandan National Liberation Army before being exiled to Kenya. The family spent time in a refugee camp before being let into the United States in 1991 and settling near San Diego. Soon after, Richard was honored by President George Bush Sr. for helping other refugees get jobs. Walter Lamb is founder of a non-profit organization that helps refugees resettle in the San Diego area.
Normally when I see the refugees coming down the escalators, I can tell whether this is going to be a successful case or will be a burden. And when I saw the Olangos, I celebrated. This is a family that looks unified, they are all together, and on and on.
He knew Olango well.
Welcomed them to San Diego and as part of the Ugandan community. And this young man also was good friends of my children. They played soccer together. And their father, Mr. Richard Olango, was the coach, coaching these children in football.
Alfred kept close to his family. He was seen as a protector who liked to bring everyone together. Lucy Olango was at the scene when her brother was shot. Lucy is the elder sister of Alfred Olango.
We do really miss Alfred because he was the light of our family. Even if he was in the middle. I know I'm older than him, but he would do anything, stand to protect me.
Apollo Olango, brother of Alfred Olango.
Alfred was someone that would always make sure you're fine. He's given a shirt to a homeless person while we were just walking down the street in San Diego. Apparently he had an extra one in his car.
The Olango children went to a Catholic school, then to San Diego High. But growing up in an adopted country wasn't always smooth.
All I can say in that particular situation, when you come to a new country, sometimes it's difficult learning the ropes. But I believe that he put himself on a straight and narrow track eventually and started walking a direct line.
Lamb also knew a different side of Alfred.
This was a very, very, very helpful young man. I remember just before his death, there was another funeral of a Ugandan that died in here. Huh? This is a man that went out of his way, because some Ugandans and Africans in here did not have transport, they don't have transportation. He provided transportation, bringing people to the funeral and all that.
Alfred was a professional cook. He dreamt of opening his own restaurant one day.
African cuisine, mixed American, whatever, because he's been working in American restaurants, of course, but he also knows how to cook African food. So usually he would come to my house also and like, show me how to cook this, you know, this and that. And he was one of the best cook as well, but I beat him in cooking so far, but Mom taught all of us, and all of them know how to cook, so, which is good. It didn't matter whether it's a boy or a girl, so taught everybody.
Alfred had separated from his wife. He had several children and relished spending time with them.
Alfred had children, beautiful young daughter, Sheree. Had a few other daughters as well, and they're wonderful kids. He loved the family life. I think that that's what he really wanted.
In the month before the shooting, Alfred seemed fine. He returned to San Diego from Phoenix, Arizona, where he worked for a time at a suburban steakhouse. Alfred missed his family and another important person in his life, a fellow refugee. Bariket Demez, an Ethiopian, had been Alfred Olango's closest friend since elementary school.
Erke was actually he was a great friend to the entire community. A young man, Ethiopian. He actually was involved in an assault where he became paraplegic and lost the use of his limbs below his waist. And life had become very difficult for him.
Alfred's best friend had problems. A friend of Barricade's, Jamal Mohammed, said Barricade was in turmoil over his health and a relationship.
He was a guy who was very active, and all of a sudden he transitions into being in a wheelchair. It hits him hard.
He was a regular around Alfred's family.
He had hung out with his friend Barricade, and even took him and drove and went to my mom's place, and they hung out together and things like that. And he dropped Barricade, I don't know exactly what day, back to his place. And then Barricade committed suicide, and he was just so devastated. They were so close.
That affected him in a very, very negative way. I called him, I asked him what's going on with Barricade. He said, Apollo, he's gone. And I could hear that it really hurt him.
The two made plans to meet.
I was actually on my way to Uganda. I was going to be heading back to visit some family and whatnot. And he said, Apollo, I could use some gas money. So I sent him some money to Western Union. And a few hours later, my phone just starts ringing out of control. What's going on in the news? What's going on in the news? Is that Lucy in the news? What's going on? And all I know is that I sent him money to come pick me up so we can go to the airport the next day. We were going to spend some time together and go over exactly what went on so I could just be there for him. That's really what I wanted to do. But he never made it.
Breaking news.
Angry crowds growing as we work to figure out why El Cajon police were forced to shoot a black man.
Live there with reaction from witnesses to the shooting.
The police killing of an unarmed black man, Alfred Olango.
On the day of the shooting, Alfred Olango showed up at his sister Lucy's apartment. She woke up to let him in. Alfred was confused and scared. He told her people were after him and that he hadn't slept for 2 days. So, at 12:57 p.m., Lucy called for help. Lucy dialed the 911 emergency number for police. She told the dispatcher that her brother was having a mental breakdown and needed to go to a hospital. And she also informed the dispatcher that he had no weapons. It was a 5150 call, a code that Alfred Olango might have a mental health condition. Lucy stepped away to get ready for her job as an aide at a mental health facility. But when she returned, Alfred was gone. She got into her car, then she was shocked to see Alfred wandering erratically in and out of traffic. Lucy followed her brother, desperately trying to get him to stop, but Alfred wasn't responding. She called 911 a second time, 47 minutes after her first call.
Molson at the ARCO, reference of 5150. Subject is BMA 30s, black tank top, blue pants.
The second time when I called for help, when I saw Alfred crossing the street and he was in the middle of the street, nearly got hit by a car, and I was crying on the phone. Why there's nobody, you know, it's been a while since I called and nobody even called to let me know what is going on.
Another 17 minutes passed and still no police. Lucy called 911 a third time, but the dispatch again said all officers were busy. Finally, at 3 minutes past 2 p.m., more than an hour after Lucy's first call, the dispatcher center sent Officer Richard Gonzalez and Josh McDaniel to the scene.
227, okay, was the RP from the ARCO station like an employee?
No, it's the sister of the subject who's calling.
228, 227, I don't see him on Broadway. Seymour, that's the last place you saw him. His first name is Alfred, same last name as the RP.
Lucy saw police cars at the ARCO station. She approached Officer Gonzalez.
I met him and told him my brother is not armed. He's not doing very well. He's having a mental breakdown and he needs help. He asked me if my brother was ever diagnosed with mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, or whatever. I told him, not to my knowledge. And I was done with him, and then he drove and went to the side looking up for Alfred.
Gonzalez drove to a mall across Broadway next to Pancho's restaurant. He spotted Alfred in the parking lot, and so did Lucy. A drive-through camera at Pancho's recorded what happened next. So did one restaurant worker's smartphone. Michael Biasori breaks it down.
He's there now, and I see, and he's walking off the curb, his right hand is in his pocket.
Get your hand out of your pocket. Still non-compliant, still won't get his hand out of his pocket.
The sister is yelling, and she's in this picture now, the same thing. Take your hand out of your pocket, and he's still not complying.
So I'm pleading there, Alfred, please raise your hand, raise your hands, please don't do stupid stuff. Raise your hands up. He wasn't processing, and the officer continued to say, raise your hands, raise your hands. Of course, made Alfred more agitated.
So we're asking him in a split second to make the judgment. He's gambling with his life that that's not a firearm.
Shots fired. 833 Broadway, rear of the taco shop.
Do you have somebody you could call?
For help, not for you to guys
Yeah,
come kill
I think
him.
she's just still in shock. So
The object Alfred Olango pointed at Officer Gonzalez turned out not to be a weapon. It was a vape pipe for electronic smoking. After Lucy Olango's first call for help, El Cajon police took more than an hour to arrive. But only minutes later, Alfred Olango was shot 4 times. In the aftermath, crowds gathered, some demanding answers. That evening, police provided one. From the cell phone video, they released a still photo they said explained the shooting. El Cajon Police Chief Jeff Davis.
At one point, the male rapidly drew an object from his front pants pocket, placed both hands together on it, and extended it rapidly towards the officer, taking what appeared to be a shooting stance.
Later, an autopsy report said Alfred had trace levels of alcohol and cocaine in his system. The local district attorney investigated the shooting to determine if Gonzalez acted legally. Bonnie Dumenez, San Diego County District Attorney.
After carefully reviewing the facts, the evidence, and the law, we've determined the officer's use of deadly force was reasonable under the circumstances, and he bears no criminal liability for his actions.
The Olango family and their supporters in the community did not see it this way. Reverend Shane Harris leads the local chapter of the National Action Network, a civil rights group.
So I want it to be very clear. We do believe that Alfred Olango was unjustly killed.
Harris says Olango's refugee status has given the issue of the officer-involved shootings international visibility.
One, it deals with an international presence of pressure on America around policing. But two, it deals with clearly the issue of how America deals with mental health and how police deal with those who are not harming anybody or hurting anybody but calling for help. One thing is certain on that day, Lucy was not calling because he was hurting anybody. She was calling for help and assistance. We're hoping that people who come to this country, refugees, are treated with help that they're seeking. They come here seeking peace and protection.
It's been tough. It's been so hard. We are all still grieving, and we'll continue to be grieving the loss of Alfred.
It's hard to describe, man. There are no words to describe the emotional feeling that you go through when something like that happens. And I couldn't stand, I know that. I just had to get on my knees, that was it.
Olango's father, Alfred's estranged wife, and 2 of his children filed civil rights lawsuits against the city of El Cajon and Gonzalez. Lucy also sued for negligence and emotional distress.
Multiple sources tell us that it's Richard Gonzalez, an officer well known to our Team 10 investigators.
Gonzalez's lawyer did not respond to the questions from NBS and VOA. But before the shooting, his job performance had already come under scrutiny. Gonzalez had been demoted from a desk job to a patrol duty after a female El Cajon police officer accused him of sexual harassment and sued. The city settled her claim for $90,000. Lawyer Dan Gillion represents Lucy Olango.
I have all sorts of problems with Richard Gonzalez leading into the scenario, just from the character of the person that he's demonstrated himself to be. But if you even just limiting it to what we see on the video, this is a cowboy that decides to pull out his gun on somebody who has not committed a crime.
Here in San Diego, there is another way to handle these kinds of calls. A PAT team, that is a special police unit to answer calls involving people with mental problems. PAT stands for Psychiatric Emergency Response Team. A patrol officer and a clinical expert work together to prevent encounters from becoming violent. Mark Marvin oversees the PAT program in San Diego County. The team operates in 11 jurisdictions, including El Cajon.
When a 911 call comes in to dispatch, the dispatcher can look at who's out in the field and can basically dispatch a PERT team to that scene when that person is in the midst of a psychiatric crisis.
Bobby Stans helps run an addiction recovery program in San Diego and used to work with Lucy Olango. Her insights about Alfred were both as a sister and mental health care aide.
If you can imagine having done that work for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and then having a family member experiencing a psychiatric crisis, and understanding that you need some assistance to de-escalate him because you're unable to do so by yourself, and you call for assistance, you call for help. And imagine the response that she got was nowhere near what she was expecting.
Stan said it was common for a person in mental crisis to mimic someone who frightens them.
Clients in a mental health state, if you posture at them, they raise their level and they posture back because they want to show you, I'm not intimidated by you. In normal circumstances, everyone becomes compliant. Alfred pulled out a vape pipe and pointed them at them. Alfred, in this mental health state, postures back, and boom, we have Alfred die.
But did Alfred's breakdown have to get that far? During our reporting, we sent detailed questions and document requests to the city of El Cajon and the district attorney's office. City officials said that the law allowed them to withhold some material. They said that the pending family lawsuits prevent them from discussing the shooting.
But do you think the shooting was justified for Olango?
Well,
you as a police officer.
So you're getting into questions again that I can't get into because of litigation.
But in the response to one of our public records requests, NBS and VOA found something the city had not disclosed before. It was a summary of activity by police dispatchers the day of the shooting, and it revealed a critical decision. A decision that prevented Alfred Olango from getting the kind of help his sister Lucy expected. When Lucy Olango walked into the taco shop parking lot, Officer Gonzalez already had his gun in hand.
Pulling a gun and say, raise your hands up, is not a way you come at a person who is having a mental breakdown. You haven't even engaged with the person. He has not talked to you. You did not find what was wrong. How can I help you? What's going on? Is there something I can do to help you? He didn't do none of those.
Hundreds of police around San Diego have been trained in PAT de-escalation tactics. So have many El Cajon officers, although the city officials would not say whether Gonzalez was one of them. On the day of the shooting, a PAT team was available on duty in El Cajon. Why wasn't it called to the scene? This is what police said then. At the specific time of the incident, that team was on a different radio call that was also PAT related. They were not immediately available. But that wasn't the whole story. The dispatch records show that, in fact, the PAT team was available for Lucy Olango's call. The team was clear at 1:53 p.m. It was 8 minutes before she called 911 the third time. But for reasons that aren't explained, dispatchers sent the PAT team on a different call, one that had come in after Lucy Olango's. That other call, about a stranger dancing at a boys and girls club, turned out to be minor. And the records make no mention of a mental health issue, while Lucy Olango had told dispatchers twice that her brother was having a mental breakdown. We showed the logs to Lucy's lawyer, Dan Gillion.
It was a big mistake in not sending that PERT team to this call because they had every evidence needed that this was the call that required the PERT team.
Could it have changed the outcome for Alfred Olango?
I think that that PERT team could have actually calmed down not just Alfred Olango, it might have calmed down Richard Gonzalez. It might have said to Alfred Olango, here, we're here to help. And it might have said to Richard Gonzalez, the officer, you're not, no cowboy's not needed here. We've got this under control. We know how to deal with people with mental illness.
The city confirmed that the PAT team never was sent on the Olango call. It did arrive later in response to police radio reports, but by then it was too late.
After they shot and killed my brother, I'm crying desperately. Nobody even consoling me. The PAT team come after they kill my brother. I'm like, what are you doing here for? Oh, because the PAT team were responding to other matters or other urgent. So my brother wasn't urgent. I know probably they don't have enough team to go around, but they could have at least find at least one person that could do crisis communication with him.
We asked the city of El Cajon whether dispatchers sent the PAT team to the wrong call. In a written response, the city's attorney said the dispatch logs, quote, speak for themselves, unquote. Since the shooting, family members have created the Alfred Olango Foundation with the goal of addressing issues Alfred cared about.
And I understood his vision of the world and what he thought about and how he felt about it. And sometimes he just talked to me about homeless issues out of nowhere and how he felt about it, what he thought about it. So I'm going to basically make sure that the foundation is designed around that. And I definitely want to tackle procedural issues, policing-wise, to make sure that there's a halt to all these shootings that are going on. Some sort of a change that is better for people so that people don't have to suffer like this.
In response to our questions, El Cajon officials said no dispatch procedures had changed as a result of Alfred Olango's shooting. For her part, Lucy Olango still struggles to make sense of all that happened and how the system failed her brother.
What do we learn when you're in school, little kids? 2-year-old, like 5 or 6. Something happened, what do? Call 911. Things have changed a lot. When I called, I was hoping that they'll help him, take him to the hospital, and he could come home.
Home is now an unmarked grave.
But no, he's not going to come home. He never did.